Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Continuing the discussion on the appearance day of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Everyone please turn off your cell phone. You want to drink water? No. Okay, I'll say it again. Turn off your cell phone. Turn off your cell phone. If you haven't yet done it, please take your cell phone out of your pocket and switch it off. Thank you very much. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his very name, Bhaktisiddhanta, may have seemed strange to many people. At that time in India, it had been going on for some time that the Indian people, especially in Bengal, the intellectuals, which means those who were trained by the British, not the traditional intellectuals so much. Means that learning in India traditionally had been in Sanskrit. Of course, there was Islamic learning also. But the British had a specific plan to undermine Indian culture so that they could better control India by redefining the intellectual landscape, by training young men in English language, which previously no one was interested in. They thought that was, among the Hindus, they thought that's the language of the barbaric people who kill cows and rule by force. They have no culture. They wear shoes inside the house and so many things they do which are completely uncivilized. But the British introduced this, then if you have an English education, then you can get a job in the British administration. And in this way they started this with the specific aim of remolding the whole Indian culture by introducing Western ideas, which they presumed to be axiomatically superior in all respects to everything Indian. Even the British in India, most of them didn't like to even learn. They would live in India all their life, but they wouldn't learn any Indian language. If they found their children mixing up with the children of the Indians and learning their language, they would do, no, you don't learn. They'd keep away from them. They'd keep a distance. And the effect of this was being felt, that many people, especially in Bengal, they felt that, yes, this Indian culture, there's so many nonsense things. British culture is better. It was an intellectual attack. And there were intellectual responses to this. In the form of, in Bengal there was the Brahmo Samaj. Later there was the Ramakrishna mission. Ramakrishna himself was not a philosopher in the traditional or in the academic sense. He was considered to be a bhakta. So you can understand what people think he was doing bhakti. His idea of bhakti was definitely not according to Bhaktisiddhanta. But he was among the many paths that he claimed to follow. It was his bhakti, supposed bhakti for Kali, that was the most prominent. It had been very influential in Bengal, and later through the efforts of Vivekananda, he became widely known throughout India. As Vivekananda became widely known, he started the Ramakrishna mission. And Vivekananda wrote many books, unfortunately. So his was an intellectual response. The British gave the idea that the Indians are weak and effeminate, and their religion has nothing practical to give to the world. So the Ramakrishna mission was supposed to counteract that. Therefore, I'm getting into a little bit of detail here. Vivekananda gave the idea, you should be strong. Isn't it? You all know that. Vivekananda gave the idea you should be strong. Eat meat. He gave the idea that you should eat meat and become strong. Otherwise you can't do anything. But it was an intellectual response. Elsewhere there was the Arya Samaj, Prarthana Samaj on this side of India. Prarthana Samaj in Bombay. So there, it was a response to the intellectual attack that Christianity is superior, Hinduism is all nonsense, and everything Western is better. Western people are much more rational, sober, intelligent, practical. So there were various responses to that. And there was much discussion and debate about religious paths. And here comes Bhaktisiddhanta. Because Bhakti and Siddhanta, they were considered to be different things. That there's philosophy, and philosophy that means, in Hinduism, that means philosophy means Advaita. Vivekananda preached what is called Neo-Advaita, because as Srila Prabhupada commented, even Shankaracharya, who first propagated this Advaitavad, later known as Kevaladvaitavad, even he would be shocked and disgusted to see what these people are doing and saying in the name of Advaita. He would not be happy with Vivekananda, who took Advaita to mean that you can eat meat, not that you can, you should eat meat, for instance, among other things. Playing football is better than reading Bhagavad Gita. It'll make the body strong. Another of Vivekananda's great contributions. Please don't sit with your back to Krishna. Please don't sit with your back to Krishna. So bhakti, that was considered to be just feelings and emotions, but when you come to actual philosophy, then, as Krishna says in Gita, it may be taken like that. What is that? Tatal sukhe dukhe samekritva labha labha jaya. It also, again and again, Krishna speaks about being equipoised in all circumstances. Samatvam yoga uchyate. Being equipoised, samatvam, that is called yoga. Whereas bhakti is very emotional. So where is bhakti and siddhanta? The two don't come together. Of course, that's a great misunderstanding, because the Vaishnava Acharyas, beginning with Sri Ramanujacharya and his followers, particularly Vedanta Deshika, and Madhvacharya, and his many followers, they have established that the ultimate Siddhanta of Shastra is Bhakti. So many. Vallabhacharya has given so many writings, philosophical writings, as well as his very beautiful writings, which just they express the spirit of Bhakti. Quite famously among ISKCON devotees now in India is Vallabhacharya's Madhurashtakam, describing the sweetness of Krishna. But he also wrote so many philosophical works, commentaries on Vedanta Sutras, commentaries on Bhagavatam, and of course in our Gauriya Sampradaya, Rupa Goswami. Please turn your cell phone off and don't take photographs also. Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and particularly Jiva Goswami, they established Bhaktisiddhanta, and this term Bhaktisiddhanta comes several times in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. But cheap devotees, those who are not actually very serious about bhakti, they had the idea, well, we'll just have the feelings of bhakti without the philosophy. The feelings as manifested by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and as described particularly in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. In Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, before describing the ecstatic manifestations of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, gives much shastric and philosophic background as to how he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He also states, Siddhanta bolaya chitte na karo alash, iha hoite Krishna lage sudhira manos. Do not be lazy in understanding Siddhanta, the proper philosophical conclusions, which is bhakti. Siddhanta means bhakti, ultimately. It means bhakti. Because by understanding this, one's mind will be very strongly attached to Krishna. So it's a kind of laziness to not want to understand the philosophical conclusions given by the acharyas, given in Shastra. To just want the nectar. We want to enjoy the bliss of Krishna consciousness, but not trying to understand the teachings of Krishna consciousness. But that's what people in Bengal in particular thought that bhakti is. Bhakti is just some emotion without any philosophic background. But without any philosophical basis, one is unable to distinguish between spirit and matter. The first step in spiritual understanding is learning to discriminate between spirit and matter. And if one doesn't do that, or if one is not assiduous in doing this, then one may try to go immediately to the pure state, to attain one's siddha deha, one's perfect position in spiritual emotion. The adhikana labhya siddha deha bhave. What is that? Viparit phala bhave, shaktira bhave. If one tries without qualification, if one tries to meditate upon one's perfect spiritual position, then one will get the opposite effect due to lack of strength, lack of spiritual strength. So it's not that one can just imitate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his ecstatic emotions, neglecting the fact that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also taught in great detail the teachings of Krishna consciousness to his intimate followers and instructed them to write books outlining all of these things. So what had happened in Bengal is that cheap devotees they want to get the essence of pure love, pure Krishna prem, but they were lazy in understanding the Siddhanta. Because it takes quite some effort to apply one's mind in all these things. And you may think, well, why not just chant Hare Krishna and be happy? What do we need to understand? There's so many things. The essence is to chant Hare Krishna and love Krishna. So, okay, I love Krishna. But loving Krishna, there's a path of doing so. Ado Shraddha Tata Sadhu Sangha. Then bhajana kriya, anartha nivriti. By associating with sadhus, they will help us to become free from all our material attachments. Sadhu, santa evasya chindanti manovya sangam uktibihi. The sadhus, they will cut our material attachments by their harsh words. But if we think, oh, bhakti is very sweet, so let me enjoy the sweet. Immediately, the tendency of the conditioned soul is whatever we come in contact with, we want to enjoy it. That is the conditioned tendency. So when we come to bhakti, we also think, let me enjoy it. And all this stuff about giving up sense gratification. Well, I'm already feeling for Krishna. I have these strong feelings for Krishna. So that is prem. But without distinguishing between spiritual and material, we mistake our mundane emotions, not understanding actually who Krishna is. We mistake our mundane emotions, which we project onto Krishna, to be fully spiritual. So not distinguishing between mundane emotion and not knowing what is the nature of pure emotions for Krishna, then we think that the emotions the feelings that I have when I'm with my wife or someone else's wife, that is love, prem. It's all prem. And this is the fall down of the Gauriya Sampradaya, that people, they want the highest prem, but they don't distinguish between that pure love of Krishna, which is beyond any material attachment, and mundane lust. Therefore, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, before describing Krishna prem, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give, he distinguishes that Atendriya Priti Vancha Tare Bale Kam Krishnendriya Priti Ichha Dhare Premanam. There's a difference between mundane lust, which is based on personal sense gratification, the desire to enjoy one's own stool-filled body and metaphorically stool-filled mind, is not the same as the selfless love of Krishna, in which one simply desires to serve Krishna for Krishna's pleasure, not for my pleasure. So those who don't do that, who are lazy in understanding Bhaktisiddhanta, who think, well, it's easy, just love Krishna, they fall down. So Bhaktisiddhanta is required, and it will always be required, because the tendency of the conditioned soul is to want to enjoy. And again, he'll bring that into bhakti. Let me enjoy. As long as that enjoying spirit is there, then one is prone, even if one gives up gross sense gratification, one is prone to subtle sense gratification. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu warns, Labh puja pratishtadi jato upashakagan. And this pratishta, prestige, that is particularly dangerous for someone to be recognized as a Vaishnava. So our acharyas have spoken extensively against this. So that idea was very prominent in Bengal. Bhakti, that's just emotion. And that there's no philosophy means to become free from emotion. That was the Advaita philosophy. But bhakti means, actually it means emotion, but emotion beyond the low class, animalistic desire for sense gratification of this world. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur really has to be understood via Bhaktisiddhanta. Otherwise, it might seem that he was hypocritical. You can see the photo of him here. He's dressed in a long coat, which sadhus, they don't wear Western clothing. At least at that time. No one would wear such a thing as a coat, because it's Western style clothing. Leather shoes, socks. He's standing next to a leather chair, which sadhus, they also don't sit in chairs like this. They may sit on it, but they should sit like this. They may sit on a raised asana, but not on a chair which you just put your legs in front. That's something Western. So he introduced many things. Sadhus he had a wristwatch. Sadhus don't have wristwatches. He would go in cars. It seemed like he was a sense enjoyer. As long as he was with Gorky Das Babaji, he was quite good. But then he founded this Gauriya Math, and he spoke so strongly against all kinds of sense gratification, but it appeared that he himself was like a babu, a gentleman of this world. But again, that has to be understood through Bhaktisiddhanta. What is Yukta Vairagya? Rupa Goswami's teachings. Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatharham Upayunjataha Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yuktam Vairagya Muchyate. One has to that not being attached to anything of this world, but seeing everything in the world as paraphernalia for Krishna's service. One can live in this world in Yukta Vairagya, not just giving everything up, but using everything in Krishna's service. So all these points have to be understood very carefully. Therefore, Siddhanta Balaya Chitte Na Karaha Alash. One should not be lazy in understanding this subject matter. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he certainly wasn't lazy in distributing Bhakti Siddhanta. Apart from his writings, he would speak extensively. For him, a 2-hour talk was a short talk. He would speak for 5 hours or 6 hours. Philosophy. Hardly he told stories. There are so many stories in Shastra, no doubt. But generally his proclivity was not to tell stories, but he would speak philosophy, and in quite a complex manner. Not only was the subject that he presented complex, but his linguistic style was also quite complex. Not quite complex, almost non-understandable. Actually, I had that experience. By the grace of Srila Prabhupada, I learned Bengali at a level that I could many years ago. I can read it and speak it, but I didn't read Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's writings for a long time until someone encouraged me, because I thought it's just too tough. And Srila Prabhupada also said, when I first heard him, I couldn't understand it, but then someone encouraged me. No, you try. You have to apply your mind. You can understand it. So I did. That was a great breakthrough for me to read his writings. But once you understand the style, then you'll find that one extremely important feature of his speaking and writing is that it is in such a manner that it is not at all vague, it's very clear, it's not misinterpretable. This is a very important feature, because even Shastra itself, parokshavad rishayaha, it's often paroksha chamama priya. Krishna says that the rishis, they generally speak in a roundabout way. And I also like that. But everything he presented was very clear if you can understand the language. So it was, but you have to apply your mind. Yaha hoite Krishna lage surya manosh. It's not exactly a mental exercise, because no one can understand him unless they come to this, at least to the platform of submissiveness, of being ready to hear him. Otherwise there's no question of even beginning to understand anything that he says. But it was difficult. Even his own followers, they would sit and listen, and afterward many of them would go to Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj and ask him, well, what did he say? They'd sit through the whole lecture, and then he'd explain it to them after. He'd translate it for them from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's what he called Gauriya Bhasha. Not exactly Bengali. He said, once he was asked, once he was speaking with some people in English, and he seemed to be groping for words. So someone suggested to him that you speak in Bengali, and because Bengali was his first language. He said, I'm not speaking English or Bengali or any language of this world. You just try to hear and understand. So his speaking was particularly aimed, well, the ultimate aim was that he himself described, that Hridaya Balila Keba, Dayata Dashera Sheva, Gopi Dhanna Katar Kirtan. He wrote in his poetic introduction to his commentary on Sri Upadeshamrita that someone, actually he's speaking of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that someone said in his heart that the kirtan of Dayata Das, which means Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, is Gopi Dhanna Katha Kirtan. It's Gopi Dhanna Katha. So Gopi Dhan means Krishna, Kirtan of Krishna, particularly Krishna of the gopis. Elsewhere, Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes Krishna as Gopi Parana Dhana. Elsewhere he describes Svarasaki Siddhi, Svarasaki Siddhi, Vrajakopiyadam, that the wealth of the gopis of Vrindavan is their Svarasaki Siddhi, their own personal, individual inclination to serve Krishna, which they do perfectly. Everyone's an individual. So glorifying Krishna of the gopis and the gopis' service to Krishna, that is his kirtan. But to reveal that, he first wanted to bring devotees to the platform of proper eligibility. Adhikana labhya siddha deha bhave viparita phala janme shaktir abhave. These words of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that without becoming properly eligible, if one tries to meditate upon one's perfect position, one's Svarasaki Siddhi, Siddha Deha, then there'll be an opposite result. One won't get that due to lack of Shakti, lack of proper qualification. So he would speak for hours philosophically. He wrote so much. Actually, he had so much to say. And his followers would collect that, make articles on this from all angles, in all ways. He spoke on the subject of Shastra. He was vastly learned in not only in Vaishnava philosophy, but in all various philosophies of India, of the Western countries. He could meet with anyone and speak. He would go on speaking and speaking and speaking, trying to convince people. But it wasn't like some college lecture where just speaking and it's boring and you fall asleep. But he was imploring people. It may be common people. Generally he'd speak to very educated people. He sometimes went to villages also. But in those days in the villages there were many educated people also. Whether it was non-devotees, first-time comers, or among his own disciples also, he would implore them. He would again and again. He said that there was one verse which he had put on the wall when he was living in the home of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhakti Bhavan in Calcutta. One verse from Bhagavatam: Labdva sudurlavamidang bahu sambhavante manusham artatam anityam apihadhira turnam yateta napate danumritya yavan nisrayasaya vishaya kalu sarvata syat. That this human form, human body, is very rarely attained, but now we have attained it, somehow or other. But it will die in a short time. It won't last very long. So before this body falls down dead, we should utilize the opportunity of this human life, which is arthad. It can give us real meaning. We should utilize this opportunity so that we don't have to get born again. And we should consider that we have attraction to sense gratification, but that is available in every species of life. But this self-realization is only available in the human form of life. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he said that I will preach this verse up to my last breath. And that was really Gopi Dhanna Katha Kirtan. That was his ultimate, to give kirtan, to glorify the wealth of the gopis. But practically catching people at the level of trying to convince them and practically begging them sometimes, imploring, take this Krishna consciousness very seriously. Don't think that bhakti is just some semi-spiritual or religious, something to make me feel nice. Definitely we will feel nice if we perform bhakti, but we should know how to perform bhakti in such a way that we will actually become satisfied. Ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. We have to give ourselves fully to Krishna. How are we going to do that? How are we going to become convinced? We have to understand who Krishna is. There's so many misconceptions about Krishna. We have to understand who we are. We have so many misconceptions about ourselves. So in this way he taught Bhaktisiddhanta. And we should also go on studying Bhaktisiddhanta. By far the best way for studying Bhaktisiddhanta, practically the only way in the modern age, is by going through the teachings of Bhakti Vedanta. Bhakti Vedanta and Bhaktisiddhanta, the terms are practically the same. These two Prabhupads have given us the knowledge by which we can go beyond the semi-mundane, sentimental, feel-good kind of bhakti, which without very deep commitment or understanding, or without even the desire, or without even knowing that one should be deeply committed, and taking bhakti to be some extension of one's plans for sense gratification, pious sense gratification, going beyond all that, and actually coming to the spiritual world via Bhakti Vedanta, Bhaktisiddhanta. Siddhanta bolaya chitta nakaraha alash yaha hoite Krishna lage sudira manash. So bhakti, what is that? how is it to perform, why it should be performed. Everything is given in the writing of the Goswamis. And it was this kirtan that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur came to this world to do this kirtan. So time is up now. It's up to 12:15, was it? You have to finish at 12:15? Okay. Questions? Yeah. Not much time. There should be time for questions, but we also have to do Pushpanjali and so many things. Books are available. I wrote this book, Bhaktisiddhanta Vaibhava. You can open it anywhere and you can find. I opened it just now. You'll find how powerful it is. I'll just read one paragraph. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati avowed that even if the whole world were against him, or if not a single individual were to stay with him, or if those who had made a pretense of surrendering him were to leave, still under the protection of his Gurudev's lotus feet, he would fearlessly and unceasingly preach the unadulterated truth until the last moment he remained in this world. And if someday that truth were to enter the ear of even one fortunate soul, then through that lone person, the entire universe would attain the topmost benefit. So if you dare, you can take this book and read it. You can read it in a detached way. Detached way means, yes, it's nice to read, but if you actually want to get into it, if you dare, then you can take it. If you dare to Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Korea Aikya Ana Korea Manayasha. That is the challenge. If we're actually going to do that. Otherwise we can float on the surface and imagine ourselves to be in devotional service. Okay. You want to announce the books? Quickly. Yeah, announce the books. You'll get all the answers from the books. Yeah, okay.
Hare Krishna, very grateful to you for your talk. Explaining to us how you are in Bhakti, understanding philosophical aspects of Bhakti is very essential. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, ask it.
Yeah. So Maharaj, we see in Srimad Bhagavatam there are many sections which are quite philosophical to understand in terms of applying our mind. So the message what you or Bhaktisiddhanta is it that we should try our best to really understand the philosophy in terms of at least what is given in Bhagavatam in terms of so many sections?
Of course, yeah. When we're talking about Bhaktisiddhanta, that means Srimad Bhagavatam, Gita Bhagavatam, of course, yeah. Yes, that's the answer.